Hi guys, I'm Andy All,
And I'm Roscoe Wilson.
and we teach at Miami University Regionals. We run the Community Arts Program with Jennifer Purdom, who you might see coming to your school to print. And we're going to go over a couple things about how to set up your image. For the first part, you're going to be designing an image and carving it.
And we'll also talk a little bit about safety and how to properly cut your linoleum blocks without hurting yourself.
Yeah. So we look forward to working with you, and you'll probably have about a week to 2 weeks to get your linoleum carved, and then we're going to come to your school and we're going to print some t-shirts.
See you then.
So one of the first things that we want to do whenever we're considering like making an image, this is a lovely image of a skull just in time for Halloween, which is today actually. If you're designing on your linoleum, you need to consider what are going to be your darks and what are going to be your lights. And by that, what I mean is what is going to print black and what will print as, or not print. So in this case, in the skull, we want the eyes and the teeth and the nose to be dark. Whenever we go to transfer this over to your piece of linoleum, you can draw it exactly like you would do any other drawing. So if I have these round shapes that I want to be dark, I'm gonna go ahead and draw them dark and solid on my piece of linoleum, okay? Linoleum's pretty great. This is like a brown version. You're probably gonna get a gray version of this. But the linoleum works really well because you can draw on graphite first, you can erase, you can change things, but you're going to want to draw it out in black Sharpie exactly how you want it to print. Okay, so in this case, I'm making these shapes completely black. And if there's lines, I want those to be completely black. Okay, you're gonna have your drawing on here in Sharpie completely black or not black, okay? Whenever we cut into this linoleum, the only part that's gonna print is gonna be the raised surface, okay? So what that means is whenever you carve it out, it's not like you can get a gray. The only way that you can get a gray is by using proximity of lines or stippling or cross hatching. So in this case, like if I wanted to do a gray, I might put in, or like a value, I might put in like tight and close lines next to each other with gaps in between. Okay, so for some images, we've got a snake here, we've got a skull. It's not as important as if you decide to put text into your image. But what will happen is, due to the process of printing, this is called the relief process, with relief and an intaglio and lithography, what happens is, whenever this gets printed, what happens is the print is a mirror image or a flip of the original. So if I print the snake, rather than the snake facing to the left, whenever I print it, the snake will be facing to the right. Likewise, the skull, whenever I print it, it's gonna flip, okay? With this geometric design, it's not so much of a big deal because whenever I print it, the same kinds of forces are at play: balance, rhythm, movement. Those things will remain intact, it will just be flipped. Where this becomes important is if you do anything that has text in it, okay? So if you have text in it, what you have to do is you have to write the text backwards on your linoleum so that whenever it prints, it flips and it's in the correct orientation. Now there's several ways to do this. You could have a piece of paper that you write the text forward, and whenever you flip it over, if you put it into a window or near a light source, you can then trace the word backwards and it will give you an idea of what that's gonna look like whenever you flip it onto your linoleum, okay? But however you write it on here, it has to be backwards so that whenever you print it, it flips.
Okay, another thing that you might want to think about when designing your image for the linoleum cut is how you're going to resolve the edge of your plate. So you want to think about possibly if you want to create a framework and not carve out all this edge here, then this could frame in your image, or you can actually carve all the way to the edge of an image, such as this one. Actually, this one's a better example of that. Carving all the way out to the edge, and then it's just going to print this flower image, and all of this is going to go away, and your image will have a more complicated shape versus a rectangle. So you have to decide, do I want to keep it within a rectangle, or do I want to branch out and have it more sort of an organic shape into that? On this particular one, I just cut that out of the larger rectangle, so then nothing will print out here, and it's just like a floating shape. Another thing to think about is line width. So how thick is your line? And this right here is an example of just one Sharpie marker thick, and that is probably about as thin as you want to get when you're controlling your line, because any thinner than that on the linoleum, and it will start to fall apart a little bit. The exception to that is when you want to create a texture. So these smaller lines here would just be more about texture, but the line on the outside of the image would be something that you want to keep a little bit thicker so it's more substantial and it remains there and doesn't break down. So those are just a few tips for how to design your image. Today we're going to start talking about different gouges, and we're going to start to talk about how to cut the linoleum block here. So we have a drawing that Andy has started, and we also talked a little bit about how to shade through proximity of your line, and it's kind of like a hatching technique. So we have a couple different gouges here. We have a V gouge, which is shaped very pointy in a V. We also have U gouges, which is just a nice gradual scoop. U gouges are very good for just taking a lot of material away at one time. And then for detailing, a lot of times it's good to use a small one and also the V gouge. So one thing that I want to talk about real fast is there's another type of tool here that is just basically, it's almost like an X-Acto knife. It's very, very pointy chisel. And so when you're creating your very, very crisp lines in the linoleum, it's sometimes good to start with a line that goes right up to your edge, right? So you want to have the flat side go flat right along the edge of where you're cutting, and you just want to go in just a little bit, and you want to make sure that's a nice tight line straight down, and then that's going to make it a lot easier to carve toward that line and get rid of that information there. So I'll come away from this and I'll come up to that line, and it'll be a lot more crisp and it won't have a jagged edge there. So I'm always moving away from my body, away from my hand. I'm never putting my hand in front and going toward my hand. That's a recipe for disaster and blood. So what you want to do is you want to hold the tool and move away up to that line, and then flick. Move it away and flick, right? So you're going up to that nice crisp edge that you were creating initially, right? And then that'll create a nice little edge there. So that was the small U gouge, and then there's also the larger V gouge, depending on what tool you have. So I'm always moving away and scooping out the information. If I leave anything that's high still in here, although I want it to be white, if I leave a high point, it will print black. So we have to get rid of the information as we go. And this is nice and easy, nice and slow. You're always in control. You're not pushing too deep, too hard. You're just going just underneath the surface, right?
So now we're starting carving, or we're getting ready to carve. Let me go over a couple things first. Like, this is a bench hook, and what it does is, placed against a table, this bottom part locks in so it can't go. Like, it's kind of hard on this because it's got like 2 levels, but that should lock in. Some will have just a single piece that goes across. Others will have a little notch here. This notch is important if you're trying to get more angles on your carving. And what a bench hook is for is, with this tight up against the edge and your linoleum tight against it, is you can put pressure away from yourself, and this is not going to slide all over the place. If I didn't have this bench hook and I'm trying to carve, there's a tendency to want to move as you're putting pressure on, and there's more chance that you're going to be doing stuff like this and jabbing yourself. You don't want to do that. What this allows is you to lock in. You're always carving away from yourself and pushing away from yourself. Now, since this is a rectangle, I can do long ways or short, and what this notch allows me to do is kind of do a 45 degree. So if I have a particular curve that, you know, this is a little bit harder to do, I can put it into that 45, and then whenever I'm carving, right, I don't have to think about what's going to happen to this. I'm just putting pressure and allowing that to carve away from me at that angle.